So the talk is going to be presented by Tumo Kedumele, who is a master's student at BIUST, working actually on refurbishing the two-element radio dishes that we have at BIUST, which have not been working for the last several years. She does many other things. She has many hats. And then Dr. Sisco Auala is based in Namibia at the Namibia University of Science and Technology, NUST. As some of you know, I was at UNAM for 5 years, and NUST is just across the city from the UNAM main campus. So they're going to talk about this. Now, probably like, well, I shouldn't say most of you, many of you, my introduction, if you like, to astronomy and the constellations we use is the sort of Western Greek constellations, but then we use the Roman names for the planets, not the Greek ones, and most of the star names, as many of you know, are Arabic. So we use in Western culture a real mishmash of Greek, Roman, and Arabic. So before we start the talk, I thought I would just read out a beautiful commentary that I heard on National Public Radio in the United States when I was living there. So this was broadcast on the 1st of November, 1998. And I used to have the audio recording of it, but unfortunately I can't. So you're going to have to put up with me reading it out. But this is a commentary by a professor of English, Diane Roberts, who's based at Florida State University. And I was just reading a few minutes ago, she has a DPhil from Oxford. And this is a commentary about the night sky, which I thought would fit quite well with this evening's presentation. So I'll read it out. I have never been afraid of the dark. Well, maybe the dark under the bed or the dark in that closet in the back of the house that nobody ever opened, but not the dark outside. The dark of night, out in the country where we lived, was as friendly as a blanket. And the dark, our dark, far from interrupting streetlights, was like a huge stage where I could watch the dance of the sky all for free. Come November, the thick air would lift. It would turn cool as the inside of a church, and the mosquitoes would go off in search of the true tropics. Post-homework, I'd lie outside on the grass and watch the winter stars begin their procession from the silvery horizon glow of the east up to their zeniths and down again, bearing old Greek and Arabic names like incantations: Arcturus, Aldebaran, Rigel, Deneb. I'd watch them through the Gothic tracery of the leafless pecan tree branches and make the patterns: lion, bear, bull, swan. The sky is where all the myths start. Ursa Major, once the nymph Callisto, turned into a bear by jealous Hera. Orion, the hunter, killed by the goddess Artemis. Leo the lion, skinned by Hercules. Corona Borealis, the crown placed in the northern sky by Dionysus to commemorate his love for the princess Ariadne. On a good night, the stars in the arc of the Milky Way look like sequins on a velvet evening dress. On a good night, I could make out the smudge of light in Andromeda that is really a great spiral galaxy, and see that Rigel, Orion's foot, is as blue as a cornflower, and that Aldebaran, Taurus's eye, is garnet red. But these days, it's hard to see so well. We are polluted with unwanted light that shrinks the pupils and veils the sky. There's a mall and an interstate less than 3 miles away, making the sky now a dirty orange like rust. The house, which jostles up next to our old fence, has one of those street lights which comes on automatically at twilight. People are afraid of the dark. We hide in our bulb-lit caves, waiting out the terrors of the night, while overhead, invisible, wheel the queens and princesses and gods and animals, whose names we don't even know anymore, in the fabulous darkness, which is the cauldron of stories. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Tumo, is going to start the presentation, and then Sisco will carry on.
All right, can you all see me?
Yes, Tumo, full
Yes,
screen.
we can see your screen. Full screen.
All right, okay. Is it full screen now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rodri, for the introduction. Thank you, ASB team members, for inviting us and having us here. We're really delighted to share this project with you. So, as already mentioned, I'm Tumo Kedumele from BUST and also from Women in STEM. So I'll be taking you through the presentation of the study titled "The Nexus Between Indigenous People, the Ancient Knowledge of the Night Sky and Scientific Astronomy Project," which is a study on Indigenous San communities in Botswana and Namibia. So my co-authors are Dr. Sisco Auala from Namibia University of Science and Tech, Dr. Rodri Evans from BUST, Ms. Maike Pierik from Redboud University and the AMT project in Netherlands and Namibia as well. And then last but not least, we have Ms. Keletso Dichaba from Rhodes University, as well as she's a member of Women in STEM Botswana. So essentially, the project began through Women in STEM in collaboration with BUST, and then later on, we collaborated with NAST as well as Redboud. And Geloto was initially in BUST, so she transitioned for a PhD at Rhodes, but she's still part of the project. All right. So getting into the background on cultural astronomy of the San communities in Botswana and Namibia. We know that Botswana and Namibia are located in southern Africa and have a very low population density compared to most other nations in Africa. And so because of that low population density, we do not have an issue of light pollution because we don't have a lot of cities and all of that. So it's one can be able to experience unpolluted night skies in most areas, and even the nation still appreciates the dark night skies. So these countries are home to the ancient San people and their descendants, but currently they live a semi-modern life, but they still continue to hold on to their Indigenous astronomy knowledge that has been passed on by the previous generations. So this Indigenous astronomy knowledge was passed on through oral tradition, and it's still the case today. So very little of the knowledge has been documented, at least in the case for Botswana and Namibia. So we hope that with this project and with the study, we can also be able to encourage the documentation of it. The general objectives around the study was essentially to investigate the cultural connection between the night sky and the San people in both Botswana and Namibia, to really understand how they understand the night sky, how does it influence them today, and how did it influence their daily lives in the past. And it was also to highlight the connection between their knowledge and modern scientific astronomy through knowledge matching and support. That essentially means we were trying to understand and know if they are aware of modern scientific astronomy and the projects that are taking place in Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia. Furthermore, we wanted to promote San Indigenous astronomy knowledge as a tool for income generation and promote its inclusion in education curricula, and also encourage our documentation for sustainable development. All right. So focusing on the research findings from Botswana, in 2019, when we began the study, we started off with the Bangwato in Serowe, Central District of Botswana. And then later on, we moved on to the Tumo San subgroup that is also in the Central District. It's in a village called Moralane. It's about 50 kilometers away from Serowe. So the Tumo San group originally came from the Central Kalahari Desert region, which is where the CKGR is located, but they migrated from that place to the Central region or the Central District because of the CKGR land dispute with the Botswana government. So because of the migration, they eventually mixed with the tribes or the ethnic groups they found in those places like Bangwato and Bakwena. And because of this mix, most of them have adopted the Tswana culture, at least for most of the Tumo San people that we interacted with. Nonetheless, they live a semi-modern life, but continue to hold on to their ancient traditions and the indigenous astronomy knowledge. So right here are two maps. One, the first map shows the CKGR region, and then the Serowe region, the Central District region, where they migrated to in Serowe, and then Moralane, and a few other villages around Serowe. So on the second map, it's a San distribution showing the Tumo and other sub groups of the San. So you can see that from between Namibia and Botswana and the northwest, we have the Hoansi, and then we have the Nharo and the Tlo, the Gui and the Hana. And then the ones that we were working with are the Tsila here, highlighted by the red dot, as well as part of the Tumo that is in the central region, highlighted by the red dot. So these Tsila Tumo are not click-speaking San subgroups. They are more Tswana-speaking San subgroups, which is why as we go on, you will notice that their interpretation of the night sky is similar to the Tswana culture. So the methodology that we used, the entire methodology, the approach is to have a research to practice approach whereby we research and then eventually put it into practice for sustainable development purposes. So we use the qualitative inquiry method with the Tsila Tumo as well as with the Bangwato. And then in 2019, we had a focus group discussion with 15 Bangwato participants from the Serowe village, and that included assistant chiefs or the Khosana. And then in 2022, we did a semi-structured door-to-door interviews with about 20 Tsila Tumo San elders in Moralane. So the participants were chosen or selected based on their cultural knowledge, and we tried as much to follow ethical principles during the study. So some of the Tsila Tumo in Botswana and the Hoansi in Namibia, they still continue to use their knowledge of the night sky, the southern night sky, to guide their relationships with the earth and with their daily living. Most of it is used in weather predictions, particularly rain forecasting, navigation, hunting, predominantly agriculture, leadership and social gatherings, and then also spiritual understanding of nature and the divine being. But the spiritual aspect of it is hardly ever used, and it's only a few people within those communities who actually still have that knowledge. So I'm going to go on and look at some of the celestial sources that we talked to them about, as we were trying to gain an understanding of how they interpret them. So the sun and the sun halo, they also still use Tswana names, which is Letsatsi and Pitso. So the sun was significant as a determiner of success or rainfall, because too much prevalence of the sun meant too much heat, and therefore it was an indicator of poverty. It was really hard for them to be able to grow plants, or the livestock would really suffer, and essentially they would have drought issues. That is why they termed it as a sign of poverty. And then the sun halo, they still and also call it Pitso, as we do in the Tswana culture, and was an indicative of a community call to begin the plowing season after the rain. So they highlighted that they often saw it only after it has rained. If they haven't had seen any rainfall, then it was very hard to see it, and it was very rare. So they also mentioned that in the past, their forefathers would usually, the reason why it was called a Pitso, a community call, it's because when it appeared, the chief would call meetings to his royal house so that he can talk to the community about beginning the plowing season. But today they do not do that. But when it appears, they intrinsically know that it's time to begin the plowing season. So the moon and the halo, Wedi or Khwedi, and its significance in terms of Pitso. The moon was often understood to be a feminine energy. They used the lunar cycles to create their community calendars, but not recorded. It was just intrinsic knowledge that they had. And the women in the society or in the community used it to track their menstrual cycles. And the moon halo was also still called Pitso, and it was also a rainfall predictor, an indicator for plowing season, just as the sun halo. Right. Furthermore, when we got into the Pleiades and Venus and trying to understand how they interpret it or understand it, they call it Silimela, and meaning the rain stars. They said they call it Silimela because whenever they see it, they know that the rains are about to start pouring in. But that was not always the case. Like it was dependent on how bright it appeared. So a bright and clear appearance signaled good rains, and that only happened if they had seen the moon halo previously before they saw a bright and clear appearance of the Pleiades. But if it appeared the rain and also the moon halo was not really bright or the halo was not large, they knew that there wouldn't be much rainfall and therefore it was like modest harvest. So they linked it a bit to poverty as well. The major planets that we discussed was Venus and Mercury. So they call Mercury kopadilalelo, mphatlalatsane naledi ya masa, nsuna ke tsamaye or thagamoso. So the naming was dependent on what time they saw it. So it was dependent on whether they saw it in the evening or in the morning. So as the evening star, it was called Kupadilalelo as a marker of the end of day and as a marker of families having dinner time. But I remember one gentleman alluded to the fact that the reason why it's called Kopadilalelo, it was important for the community that when they saw it, they go around in the community checking their neighbors to ensure that they also have something to eat before they go to sleep in their houses. So it was seen as a sign that connects the community together. As the morning star, they call it Naledi ya masa, mphatlalatsane, ntshuna ke tsamaye or thagamoso. So as Naledi ya masa, mphatlalatsane or thagamoso, it was symbolizing the coming of dawn or light and social transition into their daily roles. But as ntshuna ke tsamaye, there's a story behind it. One gentleman, elderly man, mentioned that ntshuna ke tsamaye means kiss me goodbye. So it was symbolizing a love relationship between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, as in to say, when the morning dawns, kiss me goodbye and bless me so that as I go out there to assume my daily roles, I may have success and be able to bring food back to the house. So Mercury, they did not have any distinct name for it, but they did cite that they sometimes saw it as a faint star next to Venus in the evening. Okay, constellations and other celestial sources, they call the Orion constellation Dinjali Dikolobe, as in the three dogs chasing the pigs. So Orion's sword was represented, or they represented or call it the dogs, while the belt is represented as the pigs. So this was mainly a storytelling that they would have, or folklore at night when they are doing their stargazing, or mainani as we call it in Setswana. Then the Southern Cross, they call it Ditutwa. So they identified it as 4 large stars that were forming Ditutla or giraffes based on their asterism. So they identified that 2 upper brighter stars were male, according to them, and then 2 lower female stars. 2 other lower stars were female because of their faint brightness. So the brightness was believed to signal hardship or poverty. So the brighter it appeared, the more poverty it signaled. Simply because they would only observe them in winter, also in the southwest direction. And then if it was fainter, they knew that the winter wouldn't be that harsh in terms of poverty and all, right? Moving on to canopus, they call it Naka, or the winter horn, or Naledi ya Mariga, which is the winter star. Essentially, it was signaling the arrival of winter, and the brighter it appeared, the more harsher winters it was bringing. So it was signaling a lot of difficulty ahead for the community or the society. So we moved on to the Magellanic clouds. They call them Mahakala simply because they appear as clustered small objects to them, hence they call them Mahakala. And their brightness was also linked to poverty or success. So with the large Magellanic cloud, the LMC, they called it Tlala, or poverty, basing on its brightness and its size. So because it was large and it would obviously appear a little bit brighter than the SMC, then it signaled poverty. But because the small Magellanic cloud was smaller and therefore less bright or much dimmer than the LMC, they called it Koro, or abundance. So with that part, I remember one elderly lady was mentioning how they preferred to always see the SMC a little bit brighter than they did prefer to see the LMC. Okay, lastly, when it comes to the celestial sources, the shooting stars and the Milky Way arm, they called the shooting stars or meteor showers Sebaladinaledi, but most of them really did not have a specific name for it. So Sebaladinaledi was only, we got that from just a few, I think about 3 or 4 people within the community who called it Sebaladinaledi, and they believed that it was just counting the stars. So there was not much significance to it when it comes to the agricultural part. But some members believed that the bright meteors with very long white tails were a bad omen, or seen as a sign of a bad omen, that are linked to like illness or the death of community leaders, specifically in the royal house, like the chief. So they believed it signaled a death of a very important person, could be a president or a chief. And then the Milky Way they called it Molalatladi, or Lesagaripana la Dinaledi, also simply because it's a cluster of dust, as they believed it to be that. So it's termed Lesagaripana la Dinaledi, but as Molalatladi, it means that where the lightning rests. But one particular elderly member did mention that Molalatladi essentially means where their ancestors rest. So the Milky Way as well did not have any significance when it comes to weather forecast or agriculture, but some believed that it was serving as a path or a guide for the stars or their ancestors throughout the night. Okay, right on now, I'm going to give it over to Dr. Sisco Auala.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tumo. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for those who are maybe in different parts of the world, whether it's morning or afternoon, greetings to you as well. I just want to start off by thanking the Astronomical Society of Botswana for this kind invitation. We really appreciate that. And especially to get our work out there. And I also want to thank Dr. Evans for introducing us. My name, as mentioned, it's Sisco Auala. I'm from the Namibian University of Science and Technology. And my background is not really in astrophysics. I'm in the social sciences. I specialize in astrotourism. And my background is I have a PhD in community-based tourism development from Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. And we've collaborating, as Tumo has mentioned, the team that is collaborating on this research project. And our part, the Namibian part, is really focusing on the Hoansi San communities. And if you can just quickly show the map, Tumo, the next slide. As Tumo mentioned, the San communities are all situated around in Southern Africa, and specifically the Hoansi that our research has been focusing is on those the Hoansi that are living in the Nyanyai Conservancy in this part. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I know the Hoansi, there are also some in Botswana and Namibia, in the northern eastern part of Namibia. But the focus on our research finding is specifically the ones from the Nyanyai Conservancy. Maybe I can just give a bit of context of what the Conservancy is. In Namibia, after independence, through the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, we established conservancies. Conservancies were established to give rights to rural communities to manage their own natural resources so they can get economic benefit from it. And the Nyanyai Conservancy is one of the first conservancy that was formed in 1998. And they have many activities, so they are given their own responsibility to manage to conserve their environment, and they benefit from trophy hunting, from joint ventures with tourism, private sectors for lodges. So there's already activities happening, the tourism activities happening there at Nyanyai Conservancy. And with our project now to do with astronomy, it started really in just during COVID. And we, if you can go to the next slide, I just want to talk about the methodology first and how we went about it. So we wanted to find out whether the indigenous community of the San communities in Namibia can try and find ways to diversify what they are offering at the Nyanyai conservancies. And we thought, let's try and see and hear from them, their perspective, what they think about introducing astrotourism as one of the products for tourism offerings at their conservancies. So as Tumo mentioned, our research is really moving away from the traditional academic research where you're just focusing on research outputs in publications and writing books about the findings. We're really trying to put our research, as we're doing research, we're putting it into practice, or I can say putting it into implementation. So when we're collecting the data now, the data for this research, it's pure qualitative. So we're gaining really deeper insight of the Hoansis on their interpretation of the night sky, and finding ways to use this knowledge to benefit them. Because when we're out there in Tunkwe, for the first time, when we're doing collecting the first data, they ask us, you are Namibian. We've been research for so many years. People have researched our ancestors. Anthropologists have been visiting us for many years, research us, but we don't really see tangible benefits that benefit us directly. So is this project going to do something different? So that's our focus is really, as we are collecting data, we have the responsibility to start implementing. And so they can start seeing that this research is trying to bring tangible benefit to benefit them. So we did focus groups, and that was in 2021. And the focus group was really following a purposive sampling technique where we got those who have knowledge about tourism, about astronomy, indigenous astronomy, and we had 23 participants who participated. And we also have semi-structured interviews. Like currently, we only have 4 elders we are currently working with. These are the few elders who really have what is left of the indigenous astronomy of the Hoansi. And through now, when we're collecting our data, we're using narrative analysis, because these are it's really social sciences about storytelling. So we decided to use narrative analysis because we are trying to document stories that are being told and personal experiences of what is left of what the elders can remember, what their parents told them about Indigenous astronomy. So this is just, I thought I'd just share the methodology of how we're going about with this research. Can you go to the next slide, Tumo? Okay, thank you. I know we don't have enough time to discuss all the different, like compared to what Tumo has been describing, the different version or similarity between what the Hoansi in Namibia interpret certain celestial bodies. But we have a paper that will be coming out in February through the IAU proceedings, so that will give more details and information about our findings. So I just want to give just a quick summary of some of the findings that we've collected. And talking to the elders, the Hoansi in Namibia, they really see that their ancestors were the first astronomers. They say they were first astronomers because they observe and theorize about the night skies, and they actually develop very complex knowledge systems that help them to understand the interconnectedness of life on Earth and the cosmos. They're really stressing on that interconnectedness because they feel like that knowledge is disappearing, and they used to share this knowledge through myths, legends, dances, and rituals with the younger generation, but now currently that is not being done anymore. So only few elders are still holding onto this knowledge, and they are very, very, very concerned about this knowledge disappearing. And they feel that if this knowledge disappears, it's going to be a loss not only to the Hoansi themselves, but they feel like this knowledge is a loss to humanity, because the knowledge that they've learned from their parents and their ancestors is that it's very important to protect both the terrestrial and the celestial environment because of that interconnectedness between the two environments. And they feel that it needs to be protected because it contributes to the well-being of the whole entire ecosystem. So they have a whole understanding of the balance and the interconnectedness of the both terrestrial and environmental and the natural environment, and how they contribute to the understanding of what is happening now with climate change. So there's a whole lot of complex information. So it's still an ongoing project. We're still collecting data. We're still talking to the elders. But if I can also just share, I thought I would just share as well one of the quotes from the Indigenous knowledge holder. He says, "My father could dance the traditional dances. And if you are very ill and sleeping, he would dance until you wake up. Even if you were sick for a very long time, he just started dancing. Now I see that dark sky learning is very good to pass on to future generation." So this is a quote from one of the Indigenous knowledge holders, because his father, he was a traditional healer and he died during COVID. And he was known in the community at Nyai Nyai as having special powers. He knew how to connect with the cosmos. So at nighttime, he was able to do these traditional rituals through dances, and people will be healed. So this is just some of the very, very sophisticated knowledge systems of the Hoansi community at Nyai Nyai. Can you go to the next slide? I know we don't have enough time, but I'll try and speed up a bit. And another, as I mentioned, with our research, because it's really research to practice. So in Namibia, what we've been trying to do is really focusing on collecting star rolls. So we've got a few star rolls that we've collected because we want to develop these star rolls into tourism storytelling, astrotourism product development. So we've really been focusing at the beginning, trying to collect the star rolls and trying to create now products astrotourism experiences through these products. So I just thought I will also just share with you another interesting star or another cosmic interpretation of creation of the Hoansi at Nyai Nyai. They have a story of their own version of the Big Bang theory, and it's centered around ostrich, a flying bird, and which was created by two gods, a god of good and a god of bad. And these two gods, they both existed in isolation and also in balance before the universe was born. So this bird will fly the unlit world, dropping feathers every day. And these feathers actually were determining the character of the bird, whether the bird is feeling hopeful, full of love, or whether this bird is feeling sad and full of fear. So these two gods play this kite game where they tied now every time the bird flew on the unlit world, the feathers dropped, and they tied these feathers to the kite, and the kite would either fly high when the bird is feeling hopeful, or will be flying lower when the bird is feeling sad. So to cut the story short, so at the end, the ostrich dropped its last feather, which suddenly glowed so brightly and transformed into moons and stars. So that's how, according to the Hoansi San community at Nyai Nyai, that is how the sky was lit for the first time, and that's how the universe was created. And what is fascinating about this story is that in many indigenous, when we go through our research and see other indigenous communities in the world, they all have the bird as a symbol of their interpretation of creation, and which is very fascinating, and maybe more research should go into these narratives. So as I mentioned, really as a summary of the core finding of the Hoansi's concern is that they want this knowledge to be used responsibly so they can feel they are benefiting from it, and also for humanity to realize that we need to protect the terrestrial environment because it's paramount to human existence and the health of both humans and the broader ecosystem. The next one. Thank you so much, Tumo. I'm gonna stop here, and I'll come back again towards the end, toward the conclusion. Then I'll come back again. So I'm gonna give over to Tumo. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Sisco. So following on from what Sisco was just talking about right now, continuing on with the research findings on both Botswana and Namibia, eventually we came to an understanding or a realization that both of these ethnic groups do not use this knowledge as much today, as most of it is deemed to be sacred, but they still do pass some of it that they believe can be passed on to people through storytelling, folklore, to the younger generations, and that is through oral means. They also mentioned that most of the people who use the knowledge are spiritual healers because it's sacred knowledge, and therefore they are considered to be keepers of the sacred knowledge that can only be accessed by the community, the specific community of those San communities when they are in need. Right. So since one of the objectives was to be able to do a knowledge matching, or rather to be able to understand if these San communities have any knowledge or understanding of scientific astronomy, so most of them indicated to have basic awareness about the current astronomy projects or knowledge that is taking place, as well as the space technology. A few of them were able to identify a constellation, particularly Orion, but this is mostly younger people who have had the opportunity to learn in a formal setting. And then they can also identify satellite movements in the sky, and they called it the Apollo. I remember this one, we got it from one very, very old lady. She said they called it the Apollo because when she was young, they would listen to the radio and they were told that a star would be moving, and it was called Apollo. I believe it's during the Apollo 11 or that time. So the interesting part about the satellite movements is that the elderly people were able to tell the difference between the shooting star, the meteor showers, and the satellite movements. Hence, they are able to tell that, no, that is an Apollo, and that is Sebala Dinaledi. So they also indicated to not really have any much knowledge about modern astronomy projects, including the instruments such as telescopes. In the last study that we did, or the last visit that we did in Moralane, we took a telescope over to be able to show them what it is, how it functions, and also use it for observation. It was a very interesting night for them, because it was the first time for them to be able to see an instrument like that. And it demystified a lot of the things that they knew about the sky. For instance, when it comes to Venus, knowing that they know that it's a star, but when we are able to show them or to view some of the planets, we were able to tell them that today we call, in modern astronomy, it's called a planet, and this is why it's called a planet, and they could see evidence through the telescope. Most of them, or really all of them, do not have any knowledge about the SKA or the AMT. The only few that did have knowledge about the SKA were one of the chiefs in one of the assistant chiefs, the Khosana, because he had heard about it from people who usually come from the university, from Beast to Serowe. So this lack of knowledge or understanding for them about scientific astronomy urges us, or it's an indicator that there is a very serious need to raise awareness about modern scientific astronomy for the general public, and especially for Indigenous people, so that they are included in the advancement of astronomy as a whole, and they also benefit from it. So here we have some of projects that are focusing on or are supporting preservation and growth of preservation of Indigenous astronomy, and supporting projects like our study here. We have Development in Africa with Radio Astronomy, as well as Office of Astronomy for Development. They have funded and supported Women in STEM to facilitate the study that we did in 2019, as well as this current study that we were doing. And then the African Millimeter Telescope in Namibia is supporting Indigenous astronomy through incorporating it in its planetarium projects, which it uses to bring knowledge to children across Namibia. Currently within BOOST, the SKA Avian Office of Botswana is contributing towards astrotourism, which also includes Indigenous astronomy within it through astronomy observation trainings for people in game reserves. All right, Sisco, you can take over from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Tumo. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, it's on. Do you see it? Conclusion and recommendations?
Yes, okay. So I'll provide our short conclusion and recommendation. As we mentioned about that, our research is really focusing on practice or implementation. And I just want to share the practical application of our research. And the idea really is to see, like in Namibia, we've really started with a lot of implementation, and just to see whether we can roll it out into the Botswana side as well, if funding opportunities do come, and we can do that in Botswana. The focus as part of the recommendation, because these recommendations are coming directly from the findings from the focus groups, because when we did the focus groups, we try to understand their perspectives. What do they want? How do they want to benefit from this research? And astrotourism came out as one of the most important aspect that they want to benefit from, especially because they are already involved in tourism. And so what we started doing is with the star rolls and the findings that we are getting from the Hoansi, we've been documenting it and trying to create products through it. And one of them is we're using technology, as you can see here, This is a VR visual reality technology that we are working with our university software engineering students. This is co-design with the Hoansi from Nyai. So step by step they are involved, because this is a co-design of the star roles. Like for example, the star role that I just shared with you now about the cosmic interpretation of creation is one of the story that is being transmitted through the VR technology. And this was an example of how we actually going back and forth with the community, trying to verify whether the information, whether the visuals that we are using in the VR reflects their original interpretation, or it reflects a good representation. Because through our research, they had a concern about being researched for so many years, and sometimes researchers don't come back to them and give a proper representation of who they are. And so with this research, we really step by step, as we're producing these products, we are working together with them so they can be the curators. They are the curator of experience. So we're not just creating astrotourism from the data we collected. We are working with them, and they are involved step by step, face to face, faces by faces, curating these experiences. So this is just an example of the VR technology that we are working with. And this is also another example of the training. We started the first phase of the training, astrotourism training, in March. And also the second phase will be taking place this year, early this year. And we are training them on how to create astrotourism business enterprises, and focusing on the youth. And another recommendation is actually focusing on the educational part, because most of the Hoansi had a concern that beside just using it for socio-economic benefit through astrotourism, they fear that it should also go into schools, into the curriculum. And we realized through our research that in Australia, they've actually started introducing Indigenous astronomy as a degree, and even in postgrad at the University of Melbourne. And this is a good example of how Indigenous knowledge can get valued through the educational system. And the idea now is, because when we started doing this research during COVID, they were not aware of in Namibia, we have the AMT, as mentioned by Tumo, the African Millimeter Telescope. At the beginning, when we collected data, they were not aware of the AMT, and we decided, so the next visit last year, we took the AMT planetarium. This is in Tsumkwe. We took it there with the University of Namibia students who are doing the presentations. We took it to Tsumkwe, and we show them, and we explained to them about the AMT and the astronomy projects that are happening in Namibia. And we're trying now, working with the University of Namibia, the students and the AMT team, try to find ways to incorporate the findings, the data, the Indigenous knowledge of the Hoansi into the presentations of these planetariums, because these planetariums are going around schools in Namibia. So we're going to try and put interpretation also of the Namibian interpretation of the night skies. And we also want to thank the African Astronomical AFAS, African Astronomical Society. They donated a Galileo scope for our last visit last year when we went to Tsumkwe, and we handed over the Galileo scope to the youth astro guides who will be trained. And we also receive eclipse goggles, you can see here, and then we gave them to the school children in Tsumkwe at the Nyai Conservancy, and they were using it to observe the sun. And in conclusion, what I really want to just emphasize on is that with Indigenous knowledge, it's not really, I think the emphasis we should focus on is not competing with modern astronomy. It's actually complementing. They are complementing each other, because if we think about how Indigenous systems in Africa have through colonization, they were not given any value. They were stigmatized as negative knowledge systems. And I think we are given an opportunity through Indigenous astronomy to do things differently and to try and give value to this Indigenous knowledge and to bring it to complement with modern scientific projects that are happening in Africa, in Namibia, in South Africa. I know a lot is happening in South Africa, to complement them together and just to realize that we live in a global community and we have different worldviews and different interpretations of the night sky. And I think maybe the time is now that we bring our, especially African Indigenous astronomy into the light. Thank you so much. I give over to Tumo. Maybe you've got something to add before we go to the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sisco. No, I don't have anything to add. So these are our references. But as Sisco has mentioned, the entire point of this study really is to move away from just research and academic aspect of it, but rather to move into implementation and practice for Indigenous people. So we really hope to get more collaborations such that we can be able to advance the study, but in a practical essence. And also we do encourage those who are interested also to, to embark on that journey, because we can't always do everything alone. So thank you so much to Astronomical Society of Botswana. Our presentation ends here. We really appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Tumo and Sisco. I found that totally fascinating. So, the San people are essentially the Aboriginal people of Southern Africa, and I do feel it's so important to make sure that their interpretation of the night sky and of the cosmos is passed down to the younger generations. My fear is that with mobile phones and TV and internet, that the younger people will just lose interest in the traditional stories. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Okay, are there any questions for Tumo and Sisco on this fascinating presentation? Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Rodri, and thanks to Tumo and Sisco for a great presentation, actually, and really fascinating stuff. And I commend you on the work you're doing, and I wish you all the best for the future on that as well. I just wonder whether you found any recognition of comets. Excuse me if I missed it, but I think you mentioned interpretations of shooting stars with long tails and so on, but did you find any recognition of comets as such? Rather, obviously rarer phenomena, but I noticed that one interpretation of sort of prognostication from those long-tailed shooting stars was as bad omens, and certainly in other cultures around the world, comets have been seen as being portents of doom and so on, deaths of kings and so on. I just wondered whether there was any recognition of comets in the work that you were doing.
We didn't actually meet any elderly people that recognized that, but there was, I would say, a young person, but not young in the essence of like a youth of today, but I would say they're young compared to the elderly people who may have recognized or seen that before. So they did cite that their parents or their forefathers did mention that they have sighted or seen or observed a comet before, but for them, they really cannot tell the difference if this is a comet, which is why they said if like they saw a shooting star with a very, very bright white tail, it was an omen. That is how they can determine the difference, but they just called it the same thing. It's just that the only difference would be the size and the brightness.
Yeah. It was just striking from what you said that the interpretation of it was very similar in terms of being a portent of bad things, for example. So yeah, strange how these things are common around the world in ancient cultures and in modern times as well. So yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks,
you.
Mike. Any other questions? You can raise
I
your
see
hand.
there's questions on. Sorry, Rodney.
Yeah.
I see questions on the chat.
Indeed. So let me read a couple of them out. So the first question in the chat is, do they know about the aurora? No, you don't typically get aurora as close to the equator as we are. And the dancing sun. Do they know about the aurora and the dancing sun?
Okay, no, we didn't encounter anyone that recognized the aurora or the dancing sun. You see, there was not that much information that they shared or that they interpreted with the sun, except that it was just an indicator of poverty or success. So that was the only thing that they could identify with the sun.
Yeah, you're not going to get, I mean, Mike may know the answer to this better than I do, but I don't think you can observe the aurora even when you get the strongest coronal mass ejections much closer to the equator than about 35 degrees or so. So Botswana and Namibia are way too close to the equator to see aurora.
It's very, very rare. Yeah, very, very rare indeed. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, the next question in the chat. How can the San Indigenous knowledge help Botswana and Namibia adapt well to the fourth industrial revolution and help rapidly grow economies of both countries?
Okay, I think I can answer that one. I think being involved in this project, practically, we realized that the youth, the San youth, are already have adapted to technology, and in the fourth industrial revolution, most of them have access to smartphones, and that's why we're really trying to introduce the digitalization of instead of just documenting it, we're digitalizing using modern technology of VR and augmented reality, because that interests them, and if they can use those technology through tourism experiences, I think it gives a unique and novel way of giving experiences of the night skies, and people will not expect that when they come to Tumke or Nyai Nyai to find these technologies there, or to find San people using VR. So it's definitely happening, and it's possible, and especially the youth, because the youth, they wanted to use this technology. They even ask for, through the training, they want to be trained on how to use AI. So the future definitely looks positive, and we can use technologies to contribute to social economic development in both countries.
And I think that ties into the point, Sisco, that you were making, that the indigenous knowledge doesn't have to compete with the, let's call it the more, well, not traditional, but the scientific knowledge. They work side by side. And in the same way that, you know, the San people can live in the modern world with their technology, but they also hopefully are keeping their traditions, their ancient traditions alive. And you can live in both worlds in the same way that, you know, you can speak more than one language. Mokaba, you have your hand up, so why don't you go ahead and ask a question, and then I'll come back to a couple of the other questions in the chat.
Thank you, sir. Just
welcome.
a quick one. I don't know if I did miss it or not, but is there any significance in terms of lunar or solar eclipse, any indigenous significance or meaning?
Okay, thank you for the question. During the study, we do not get any information around solar eclipse. But with the lunar eclipse, it was just termed, they believed that it was a bad omen, especially for women, because they link the moon with the feminine energy or with women. So I remember one elderly lady mentioned that Kastswana, they call it muila, like a taboo or something like that, that since the moon is linked to a female, they always deemed it to be a bad omen for a woman if she was to be in her menstrual cycle during the lunar eclipse. So yeah, that is the only thing that we came across there. And also, I think, but this one sort of links a bit with navigation and hunting. They believed that whenever there was a lunar eclipse, when it comes to hunting, it was seen as a bad omen for a hunter to go out because of the darkness. And therefore, it means that animals which they would be looking to hunt would not be available in the night or out roaming in the night, but they are most likely to encounter very ferocious animals. So that was one other aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple more questions from Aman, but I'm just going to read one of them for now. What do you mean when you say, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, the Hoansi San are the real people? What do you mean of the old world, and how do the San people fit into the old world?
Okay, I can answer that. That is a direct, when we say that the real people, it's a direct part of the literature review that how commonly they've been misrepresented. And a lot of literature, we all know that the Hoansi are really one of the most researched population group among the San communities, and anthropologists have called them different names, Bushmen, real people, and I just put that in there because most literature they are called the real people, but they don't really themselves, when through our research, they don't see themselves as that. And this is the corrections that we need to do. That's why we are working closely with them in the way we interpret what we find. And related to the old world is that because they are really struggling between semi-tradition, because like now, the children have to go to school because the Namibian government requires all children to go to modern school. And some parents don't feel like the children should go to school because they are not taught their culture, their traditions. They are taught something else. And their way of teaching children is different from the way the Western system of education is. And this is a struggle that they are between the old world and the new world, and struggling to find a way to fit in. And so some of them refuse to send their kids to school, and they don't go to school, they go to their own traditional schools. So this is an example of how they are struggling between the semi-traditional, the old world. I mean, English has different explanations. It's not really the old world. It's actually the current world now, but the old ways of not the old, the old ancestral cultural practices that they want to bring forth to their youth is being challenged now because of the new Western way of thinking, of education. So this is a challenge that they are experiencing. I hope I was able to answer the question.
So I had a follow-up question for that, Sisco. Are there, if they choose to educate their children in their traditional schools, is that recognized by the Namibian government? Because I think in most countries you're allowed to homeschool your children, and I would kind of look upon this as a form of homeschooling. So what is the Namibian government's attitude towards the parents who want to teach their children in the traditional ways rather than sending them to the government schools?
Yes, currently there is a community schools that have been funded through I can't remember the organization that funded the community schools, but there is a project now with the Nyanyai Foundation that have established community schools supporting the San with their own community schools. I just don't have the detailed information on how that is going about, but definitely the Namibian government does recognize that, and those schools have been given recognition. I just don't have full details of how the practice is being done, but it's something interesting to get more information about.
Right. Okay, there's another question here in the chat about astrotourism. So let me read this one out. How would an aspiring astrotourism service provider interested in deeply incorporating San or Nama indigenous understanding and practical uses of the cosmos go about becoming connected with the projects in Namibia, especially if the astrotourism project would not be near the Nyanyai Conservancy?
Because currently we're still really in the development stage, and the whole idea is that this products that we are developing is specifically for the San communities, and the idea is actually, if you are going to offer astrotourism interpretation in other region, is to use that region, local knowledge of that region. If you are going to go in Botswana and you are working with a specific San community, the idea is to use the local knowledge of those communities to interpret the night sky. So we give authentic experiences to tourists instead of what we've really done through tourism, when we try to commodify our culture in such a negative way that we distort information. Because as soon as you start having people who are trying to interpret somebody else's culture, they don't do it in a representative way that the actual people, the custodians of that knowledge would do. So we really want to keep this knowledge with the custodians and for them to benefit directly from it. Yes.
Okay, that's a good point. Aman, I think, Aman, you've got a bunch of questions, and I would like to suggest that if Tumo and Sisco are willing, you can ask some of these through email to them. But let me read out one more of your questions because it interests me as well. If the moon is linked to women, does that mean the sun is linked to men? And if the sun does not represent men, which celestial object represents men?
Okay, thank you, Aman, for the question. From the study, they did not really indicate if the sun is connected to men. But one thing that we did gather is that they connect the celestial sources to genders or energy based on the brightness of that particular energy. So for the moon, it is, even in other different cultures, it is connected to a feminine energy. And in some cultures also, it's connected to the masculine energy. But in the case of our study, I mentioned that in the Southern Cross, they identified two larger stars or brighter stars, which would be a little bit upper than the other two below them. So because they were large and because they were bright, they believed that they are connected to men, or they are a male gender in essence, or are connected to a masculine energy. And when the stars seem or appear a little less bright, then they are sort of connected to a feminine energy or to a woman. So when we analyzed, we realized that the connection to any gender is essentially based on how bright that particular source would be. So the brighter it is, it's connected to a male gender or a masculine energy, and the lesser lights are connected to feminine energy.
I think the main reason the moon is traditionally associated with women in most cultures, I think, is because of the monthly cycle of a woman's menstrual cycle, and obviously the moon does a monthly cycle. In fact, in Welsh, the word for menstrual cycle is misglwyf, which literally means monthly wound. So you can see the association there. Okay, I think we should wrap up because we've been going now for just over an hour. So if any of you have any further questions, then I'm sure Sisco and Tumo would be willing to answer them via email. So I just wanted to thank you both again for a really fascinating talk, and I think you can tell by the number of questions how people enjoyed the talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sisco, and thank you,
Thank
Tumo.
you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.
Good evening, Dr. Zipa.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you as well? Happy New Year. Happy New Year,
Oh,
Dr. Zipa.
compliment.
Yeah, saying that I saw your message about the
Yes,
project.
yes.
Are we going to review the paper soon? Because I did my research and you showed me and you gave me feedback. Are we going to review as a group soon?
Yes, yes, yes. We'll move into the next stage once the others have completed